Coming up today on Whitt from Whitt Radio.
And I don't think that it's something that you just get over and it's done.
My guest DAISY WAGNER is one of the many silence breakers in the #MeToo movement.
Where you are in your process is different for everyone.
She talks about her advocacy work for victims of sexual assault. Plus,
I'm no longer a kid that just kind of blends in. Now, it's more obvious.
Hear from DACA Dreamer CECILIA MACIAL, who has a message of encouragement for us all.
Everyone can help in their own way, just as long as you're helping.
That and more today on Whitt from Whitt Radio. Hey everyone, it's Whitt. Thanks so much for listening to Whitt from Whitt Radio, where entertainment meets enrichment. This is a podcast about laughing at life and learning along the way. It's my goal to entertain, educate, and inspire, all while providing content that helps you feel content. I believe we can all use a dose of inspo, info, and fun in our lives, so I like to say it's never a bad time for a little Whitt from Whitt. Today's show is episode 102, and it's going out on January 17th, 2018. It's going to be a bit of a heavier show today as I'm discussing two social issues we've been hearing and possibly talking a lot about. That's DACA and #MeToo. I do want to start with a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. And of course, Monday was MLK Day, and I'm sure you probably saw this quote several times on social media, but here it is. "Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter." Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So yeah, keep that in mind as you listen to the show. So in recent months, the subject of sexual misconduct has been at the center of a national conversation. In fact, we've seen a social movement and a viral hashtag with women and men coming forward to share their personal experiences. DAISY WAGNER is a sexual assault victim advocate who serves as intake coordinator at the Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Center in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. She joins me now to educate us on this issue and to share her own story. DAISY, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, no problem, Whit. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Now, we met at MTSU this past year, and your passion for this is just, it's very apparent, it's very empowering, and I mean, you definitely know what you're talking about. So to begin, can you educate listeners on what sexual assault is and what it is versus sexual harassment?
Yeah, absolutely. Sexual harassment is more of like verbal, unwanted advances, and basically it's in the name, harassment. And sexual assault is more on when people act on that. It can be attempted rape, it could be touching, it could be forcing them to do something, or it could also be rape. Not all sexual assault is rape, but rape is a form of sexual assault.
Right. And, the fact that you share your own story, I think that's incredibly brave. And as unfortunate as to ask, you were sexually assaulted, correct?
I was about 5 years ago, and I kind of never realized what was happening was what happened. And I was telling someone about it years later, and I was like, telling someone that, this person forced themselves upon me, and that person just looked me in the eyes and said, that's rape, right? And I looked back at them and I was like, you are right. And that has never crossed my mind. And the next day I went to counseling because I was just wrecked. It was just like, how could something that happened so long ago just kind of come out of nowhere, and you realize what had happened? And it definitely explained a lot of mental health problems that I was having in my own life and things that were tearing me down. And I realized that once I got that fixed, that's where that stemmed from. Mm-hmm. I actually found out that it's pretty common for people to have things like this happen and not know what it is or what to call it, or even, you can just completely shut it out. And then years later, you realize what happened. And that's very traumatic, but it's actually very common.
How have you specifically been able to move forward, or what's helped you?
I think counseling was a big part of it. I actually saw a counselor at the place I work at now, and she was absolutely amazing, completely changed my life. But then at the same time, she helped me change my own life, because I had to take those steps in my own healing, and I had to kind of figure out what was going to work for me to be okay, what I needed to do in order to be okay walking to my car alone at night, or being in my apartment alone at night, there were things that, I thought I was never going to get over it. And then that peace comes over you, and it's just, it's a great healing experience. And I don't think that it's something that you just get over and it's done. I do think that there are many parts to healing, and where you are in your process is different for everyone.
As someone who advocates for sexual assault victims, what has it been like to see this movement, to see #MeToo everywhere, and to see these women and some men take a stand and come forward with their stories?
I think it's incredible that people are finding their voice. I don't think the people that are afraid to speak up should be dismissed, because I would, for every one that does speak up, there's probably 5 that don't. I mean, that's not an exact statistic, but most of them don't come forward because they're not believed, and they're afraid they're not going to be believed. And usually those fears are very much validated by people who are ignorant to, rape culture. Yeah. And I think the fact that so many people are, empowered to come forward is such an amazing thing for those people. And I think that, that's not an easy thing to, point fingers at somebody in a more powerful position than you. That's definitely not an easy thing to do.
What are some areas in this whole societal discussion that's happening that you feel some people still aren't understanding? I mean, I know people have questions about why victims don't speak up sooner, with victim blaming, and you were touching on that earlier, but what else would you say there?
I definitely think that is probably one of the main problems, is that people, they are afraid to speak up because they're not believed. Mm-hmm. And that's something that people are like, well, why did you wait 5 years? Why did you wait 10 years to say something about it? Well, their feelings, are validated because they hear, well, what were you wearing? Well, were you drinking? Were you on any drugs? Well, did you kiss him? Well, then, you were probably asking for it. Or, even if they don't come out and specifically say you were asking for it, a lot of people are made to feel that way, or pressured that, if they disclose it, that they have to report to the police, or they have to get, this done and this done. And some people just want somebody to listen to. Some people don't want to go to court for 2 years about it. They just need somebody to talk to. Mm. There's so much more advocating and fighting towards this cause that needs to be done. It's definitely a men's issue too. And, women can rape men and men can rape men, and it can definitely go both ways.
This whole power and dominance in the workplace, do you feel like that's something that is becoming, that more awareness is being brought to now?
I definitely think that. Me personally, as a feminist, my eyes have been peeled to that for a long time now, but I do think that is becoming more socially aware, especially with things like sexual harassment and things coming out in the media, and people becoming more aware of kind of things to look for.
Right. Well, and even though a lot of the attention has been on assault in the workplace, I know that you have been especially passionate about bringing awareness to sexual assault on college campuses. You won a speech at MTSU. So what would you like to share about that?
Sexual assault is just rampant on college campuses. And I think the way that colleges handle it could be done better. And I think that the whole judicial, medical, legal, all of that, it's flawed for sure. And it's not really something that is victim empowering, I believe.
There's a saying about no means no, but I know that I heard you speak once, and you have another saying for that too, correct? Or a different saying from that, right?
Yes. I like to say yes means yes, because maybe might mean no, or, I'm not sure. That definitely means no. I mean, until you hear that yes, that's exactly what yes means, not anything else.
Talk about your advocacy work, because you are working at a center now, and how this really became your passion.
Well, I landed my dream job, and I'm so happy here. I'm so happy to be able to help everybody. Our mission is to protect victims, prevent violence, and empower survivors. And I kind of think that just speaks in of itself, that it's such a amazing thing every single day to be able to come into work and know that I've made a difference in somebody's life. It sometimes almost feels selfish because I feel like I get something just amazing out of it every single day.
Mm.
You know, we provide a 24-hour crisis line. We have a shelter. We have court advocates that go to court and help our victims. And we also have counseling, and it's all free of charge. And, you know, we do our best to help everyone that walks through our doors.
And, you know, just from your personal experience and also, I guess, professional experience too, but what advice do you want to give to anyone who might be struggling with having been sexually assaulted?
Just hang in there and don't be too hard on yourself. If you're feeling something, whatever you're feeling, it's okay. There's no textbook way that, you know, just because you were raped, you have to feel this way, or just because, you know, you were sexually assaulted, you have to feel this way. There's no specific way that is the right way to feel. If you feel angry, sad, happy, you know, it's okay. If you're sitting there and you're telling me that you're okay, that's okay. That's great. You know, you may not be okay tomorrow, but it's okay. If you're all right now, that's great. And you should let your feelings just be your feelings and not, you know, beat yourself up for being angry and, you know, knowing that it's not your fault. Whatever happened, it's not. Places like here, even if it's not this center specifically, wherever you go, you will be believed, and it will be 100% confidential. And there's nothing you need to worry about. Once you walk through those doors, you enter a safe place, and we'll be here with our arms wide open for you.
Well, Daisy, this has been really great to get this information from you, and I'm sure very enlightening for listeners who weren't as educated. So thanks again for coming on and sharing your story and your knowledge.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And for more info on this subject and on Murfreesboro's Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Center, you can visit their website at dvpshelter.org. Well, since 2012, as many as 800,000 undocumented young people have lived in America essentially unafraid of being deported. That's because of DACA, the Deferred Action of Childhood Arrivals program. It started as an executive action by President Obama, but was rescinded by President Trump on September 5th of 2017. It's been a hot-button issue of immigration that leaves a group known as Dreamers uncertain about the future. My next guest, Cecilia Maciel, is a case manager at Latino Memphis, and she herself is a dreamer. She is also one of my very best friends, and I'm honored to have her on the show today to talk about this subject. Cece, welcome to Whitt from Whitt Radio.
Hi, Whit. I'm so excited to be here and talk to you.
I'm excited to talk to you, too, about this topic, but I'm also just excited to talk to you in general because we've texted, but we haven't talked in a while. And how's life in Memphis? You're going to grad school, working, right? Married life?
You know, it's married life. I'm a part-time graduate student, and I'm a full-time case manager. It's pretty busy, but, you know, making it through. Hopefully school will go fast, but there's nothing like undergrad.
Right.
Those are the fun years, I feel like.
Yeah, which is where we met. We met at Martin Methodist College. I was a student there for 2 years before transferring, and but yeah, freshman year, and y'all, I would not have made it through biology classes without this girl right here. Just saying. It's great to talk to you, and I'm excited to have you on. And before we kind of jump into our conversation here, you know, I want to point out this is not a political podcast or a political show, but I really feel like there's such a human element to this issue that I want to shed some light on, and I knew you would be perfect for that. You are a dreamer. Let's start there. What exactly are we talking about when we say you're a dreamer? I mean, I know there was something called the DREAM Act before DACA, right?
Right. So DREAMER is pretty much an acronym for Development, Relief, and Education for Alien Minors. So the DREAM Act. It was introduced in Congress around like the 2000s, I think it was like 2001, to kind of give a path to permanent legal residency for people like me. So people who came as minors to the U.S. and really had a lot of the times, any choice in the matter, and to kind of give them a path to citizenship or permanent residency. That way they're able to, you know, do everything else that their peers are able to. So that's where dream or dreamers came out of, because that act never really happened. It's kind of come back up in the past few years, but it never passes. And so now those people that would have benefited from that act are now called dreamers.
Let's talk about what DACA is as well, because that came around in 2012 from President Obama.
So in 2012, President Obama had pretty much what they call an executive order introducing DACA, which is Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. It's for people between the age of 15 and 31. You had to have came into the U.S. before, I think it was 15 or 16. You had to be present in the U.S. when President Obama announced DACA in 2012. You had to have no felonies or several misdemeanors. So basically a clean criminal record, besides maybe a driver driving without a license or something. You have to have just a clean record, show that you either got your GED or high school diploma or in college, or you're working towards one of those things. And deferred action pretty much means that you are not going to be deported for those next. So you have to renew DACA every 2 years. So it's basically saying for those 2 years that you qualified for, you will not be deported. The only reason why you would be deported is if you had some kind of major issue with the law or something like that.
Well, and talk a little bit about your story now. You and your family came here from Mexico when you were 7?
Yes, I was 7.
Yeah. And what was it like growing up here? I guess specifically Tennessee, because that's where you've lived. But what's it been like growing up here as an immigrant, not as a citizen?
Right. So, I was 7 years old when we came to Smithville, Tennessee, which is just, a little tiny town in Middle Tennessee. And I lived in a bigger city in north of Mexico. So even though I was young and I didn't really know what was going on, it was kind of a culture shock, obviously, because it's the language, the culture. But then it didn't take very long for me to kind of just get used to it, because when you're in school and you're so young, you just kind of get used to things, and whatever your peers are doing, you do. I started second grade in Smithville, and I learned English in less than a year. I still had an accent and everything, but I was really involved in school. I was, student council president in high school. I was just super involved, and I had all these friends. And I was really like anyone else, besides the fact that I knew another language. I looked different. I didn't really see the difference until we got to 14, 15, and everyone starts talking about getting their driver's permit, and because we're going to be in high school now, we're going to be able to drive, and then a driver's license, and then having to apply to college and all of that. And that's when you realize, oh, I'm no longer a kid that just kind of blends in. Now, it's more obvious about my status because I can't apply to all of these things that everyone else is. I received DACA right before I was planning on going to college, which made things so much easier, because even though DACA doesn't give me the ability to get financial aid or anything like that, it did make me feel better of finally having a driver's license. And the college that I went to, Martin, was 2 hours away. So now it was okay for me to drive to school, and on the weekends I could come and see my family and not be worried about getting stopped without a driver's license.
Yeah.
And now just having a worker's permit, in the summers I was able to do internships that obviously if I didn't have the worker's permit, I wouldn't have been able to do.
President Trump, as I mentioned earlier, did rescind DACA on September 5th of last year. He was very much against DACA during the campaign. And then once he got into office, he kind of initially changed his tone a bit, saying the administration was going to deal with DACA with heart. But then ultimately he decided to end it with a 6-month delay. So we're still in those 6 months. And during those 6 months, he said Congress should come up with a solution. And I believe, so we're coming up, it ends in March, correct?
Yes, they kind of gave them until March. I think it's the 5th or 6th to kind of come up with something. But DACA was never meant to be a permanent fix.
Right.
Because, You have to renew it every 2 years. I've already renewed it, I think like two or three, I think it was 2 times. And it's $465 every time you renew. So it's definitely not cheap. And then I also think it's ending because obviously he doesn't agree with it and he just wanted to take it out because he didn't agree. And a lot of people would say that it was illegal and President Obama didn't have the ability to enact DACA in the first place. But I knew they were going to take it off, but I expected for them to already have a backup plan for it. I definitely didn't expect for them to just take it off with no backup plan or some kind of other act that would replace it.
Yeah. Well, and then, touching on the opponents, they say this rewards illegal immigration and this takes away from their kids' dreams, I guess, by saying, you getting a job takes away from their kids who are legal citizens getting a job. But, what do you say to opponents of DACA?
I'm pretty good at seeing both sides of the spectrum in anything. And so I completely understand why someone would be mad or not agree with it, especially those people who are really, laws are laws. I understand that, and they have to be followed. But at the same time, they're just not working, and they're old laws that need to be revisited. I didn't get the racism or backlash as much, but I did see it, growing up in the South since 7 years old.
Sure.
Almost all the jobs that I have applied for have been because they were, they have been trying to find someone and no one had applied.
Yeah.
And so I honestly don't think that I'm taking a job away. I think there are jobs out there for people, but it definitely is hard to apply. As someone who just graduated college, I understand that it's hard to find a job, but I just don't know if we are necessarily taking away jobs.
Talk about the idea of a Clean Dream Act, though. Why is it important for the families to stay together?
When people say a Clean Dream Act, they want a Dream Act that's not just going to throw other immigrants or people pretty much under the bus. So saying yes, we will give you DACA, we will give you something for a bigger, better reform for those who have DACA, but their parents have to be deported or something like that. I was at a panel a few months ago about DACA, and one of the girls said, the parents were the original dreamers because they were the ones who sacrificed their whole life to be able to come to another country and just kind of find a better environment. And so I don't think we should be throwing anyone under the bus because a lot of the parents of dreamers have been here for 15, 20 years. And so for someone to be here for 15, 20 years and just kind of, be in the U.S. to be undocumented, and you'd think that by now there'd be something that would some kind of immigration reform or at least something to enact to help that situation.
If there is no change, how will you and other dreamers be affected?
My DACA expires 2019, so let's say nothing happens in March, nothing happens at all, and DACA is just completely taken away and they let it expire. Then in 2019, once my work permit expires and my deferred action expires, I would be in risk of deportation, and then I would also not be able to work anymore, at least legally, and then I wouldn't be able to drive legally because all of my stuff would expire.
Yeah. Well, and I know the answer to this next question, but are you scared?
I'm not scared. I think obviously I don't want to go back to Mexico because I haven't been since 7 years old and my Spanish is fine, but I would sound crazy if I went over there. And, I don't know the culture obviously as much as I know the US culture, but I think something good and positive will come out of this. And you just kind of have to have a positive attitude and go with what happens. But we can't just be sitting down and hoping that things work out. We should also be doing, take action and work for it.
What would you like to share with listeners concerning DACA? And this can be for, fellow dreamers and supporters or even opponents.
So I think the first thing is being informed, finding a website, doing your research that is legitimate. If you just want the numbers, you can go to the Pew Research Center and just look at the numbers there. But I think understanding DACA first and just having the basic knowledge about it for anyone. For those who maybe don't know anyone with DACA, which I could guarantee every person knows at least one person that has DACA, but they may not know it. For them to actually talk to someone and maybe take away that stereotype, or actually just kind of listen to them. They don't have to agree with them, but just listen to it and see where the other person comes from.
Right.
So I think, being informed and then being a listener. What people can do to help is if they know someone who has DACA or any kind of other status, I think the most basic thing is just to be supportive, especially for those who are younger that have DACA, because it can be a lot for a young person to have to deal with. So to be supportive, just to be there, to be a listener and a friend. But I think also that has to be accompanied by action.
Mm-hmm.
So it's things like signing petitions. If you're not the kind of person that wants to be out there marching, it's okay. You don't have to do that. But you can, sign petitions for DACA. You can just be informed or inform other people, even if it's just, sharing something on social media about it. So taking action in some way and not just hoping for the best. I have a loud mouth and I want to be heard, and I'm okay with doing interviews and doing all that stuff, but that's not for everyone. I think everyone can help in their own way, just as long as you're helping.
Well, maybe I'll be able to have you on again as this story unfolds. But also, this was a very serious subject, and I would love to have you on sometime just to talk about something fun, because we have a fun friendship there too, outside
Yes.
of serious issues and topics. But Cece, thanks so much for being on today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I've enjoyed this.
Yeah, I'm glad. I definitely hope we've informed listeners with this conversation. And for more on Cece's story and to learn more about DACA and Dreamers, you can visit dreamact901.org. That's DreamAct and then 901, referring to the Memphis area code. Cece, thanks so much again.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, before I wrap things up today, I want to share my highlight of the week, and this week it's music related. Oh my, Troye Sivan, my. Yes, Troye Sivan dropped his new single. It's called My, and Troye has given us a bop. Oh my goodness, I love it. If you're not familiar with his work, Troye Sivan is from Australia. He had a very strong debut album called Blue Neighborhood that came out about 2 years ago, and you might have heard the singles Youth or Wild with Alessia Cara, but here he is changing the pop game in 2018, and he also comes from YouTube, and right now it's especially nice to see a YouTuber doing something so great and positive and of high quality. So way to go, Troye. Highlight of the week, My, go check it out. That includes checking out the music video, and while you're at it, you can check out Taylor Swift's video for Endgame, possibly inspired by Hilary Duff's Wake Up music video. Just saying. Finally, in my musical recommendations, Camila Cabello has released her first solo album since splitting from Fifth Harmony. It's called Camila, and I'm kind of loving it, especially the song Inside Out. And still Havana Na Na Na. Some other highlights I want to mention from the past 7 days. Well, it's been a snowy week here in Middle Tennessee, so wherever you are in snow, I hope you've enjoyed it, or I hope you've enjoyed staying warm. I did enjoy seeing my dog Chip out in the snow for the first time, although he really didn't have much of a reaction. But of course, I snapped a pic for Instagram like everyone else. Oh, and what about that whole Google Arts and Culture app where you can match your face with like a famous painting? Yeah, I tried that, and I got a 51% match with the Woman of Samaria? I don't know, it's probably a really popular painting, and I don't know what it is, sorry. But yeah, everyone's been doing that, and so I did that too. Bandwagon. And that's all for this episode of Whitt from Whitt Radio. Thanks again for listening. I hope you feel educated and inspired. If you do, be sure to hit that subscribe button on iTunes or your podcasting app. You can follow me across social media at Whitt from Whitt. And until next week, remember to let your light shine. And remember, it's never a bad time to listen to Whitt from Whitt Radio. Bye, everyone. I do want to go back just a little bit and have you mention the TV show that kind of helped you learn English, because it's my all-time favorite TV show. So what was it?
Yeah, so Lizzie McGuire, good old Hillary Duff. Yeah, when I moved to the U.S., I lived with my cousins for a little bit, and they were, in middle school and high school, and Disney Channel was just the big thing, and Lizzie McGuire was Hillary Duff was like my idol. Her and Avril
Yes.
Lavigne.
That's too funny.